Welcome to CornNation. I'm here with Justin Adams. I'm the host, Minnie Hunt, and I'm interviewing Justin as he's a fellow Husker YouTuber and fan. So welcome, Justin.
Appreciate you having me on. Excited to be able to finally join CornNation and come on and do a episode with y'all. So excited.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And I have a few questions I'd like to ask you.
Yep, go right ahead. I'm an open book.
So I want to know, by the way, we just found this out yesterday. Justin lives about 10 miles, maybe closer to me in Arizona. So it's kind of different that we found each other, I think. Two Arizonans living here being the Husker fans. So I want to know, what made you a Husker fan?
So I grew up, born and raised in Houston, Texas. Well, Beaumont, but nobody knows where that is. It's actually Sour Lake, but nobody knows where that is. So that's the name of my hometown. My dad and his 6 brothers, and his one sister, they're all born and raised in Ashland, Nebraska. And so, most of my family, a lot of my family still lives there. Some of my other uncles moved to Texas along with my dad. My dad was in a traveling band in Southeast Texas, Southwest Louisiana. So they toured in that area. So he met my mom down in Texas. So I was born down there, but it was one of those things. It's just like our yearly family trips always to Nebraska. I was basically came out of the womb a Husker fan, everybody just preaching Husker football to me. So my family's kind of divided. We're half Longhorn. The family that went to the University of Texas, they're Longhorns fans. The majority of the rest of the family is all Nebraska fans. And we got a couple of Washington fans. My dad's sister moved to Washington, so she's kind of both. But majority Husker fans. But yeah, it was kind of bred into me from day one.
That sounds like a really interesting Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Texas fans and Nebraska fans.
And we're all very competitive in my family. So I may or may not have lost a bet and had to wear a Texas Longhorns shirt for a school yearbook photo. No. Middle school. So yeah.
That's horrible.
Staying up wraps.
So then you've seen the Huskers since, probably when they were good. You remember those days.
Yeah, it was for me. So growing up, I was born in the December of 1990. So I kind of was like a kid when it was the heyday of 95, 96, 97, and throughout the early, even late 90s. One of the most, I think the first memory that really stands out to me as like, I remember this as a kid was when I was the 01 National Championship game. Eric Crouch his jersey's back there. My favorite all-time Husker. So he was kind of the quarterback that like I first remember vividly being like, cognizant, like a fan, fully watching it on my own and stuff like that. And so unfortunately, I was also kind of like where the decline kind of started is about where I kind of remember consciously back then. So unfortunately, I don't remember the excitement of the national championships just because I was so young. But
how do you keep the hope alive all these years? Or are you a jaded fan as well?
I think the biggest thing for me is, well, first off is I'm loyal to a fault, as I think most Husker fans are. And just, I don't know, like for me, right, Husker football, I grew up in a bad, like bad, I'm not trying to get dark turn, just a bad childhood home environment growing up, right? And so Husker football was just my escape from reality around me as a kid. And, I ran cross country as a kid, believe it or not. I was a big runner. And so like my Saturdays were just, I would go to my cross country meet. I'd come home, I watch College Game Day, and like Saturdays were just my escape day. And so like for me, right, it's deep rooted into like, almost to where Husker football became kind of part of me, because I was the Husker fan at school, the diehard, Nebraska fan. I was drawing pictures of like, the Nebraska logo or previewing the upcoming week by just drawing little like almost like a flyer for it. And it was every day was counting down till Saturday. And if we lost, it would ruin my week at school. And if we won, then my week would go great. And so back then it was a little bit more winning. But but it was just kind of a passion that I grew for it. That just, for me, it's just kind of like, I love this team for better or worse. You know, I went through 100 lost Astros teams paying $3 a ticket to go watch them play. So I think it's just one of those things that I've suffered through enough that I've kind of realized it is what it is. But, you know, now that I'm in more of an analyst type of position, it in the position we're at now with Nebraska, it's all optimism from my end, and it hasn't been that way for a while. So, but yeah, it's been rough sledding, but I just think I'm used to the pain and punishment by now. No.
You know, you brought up something I wanted to make sure I ask is you are more of an analyst, like you said. I know you do the Voice of College Football for Nebraska, and you have a couple other shows. What are those?
Yeah, so I do as well the Big Ten show with Sonny Verma is my co-host. He is the host of Locked On Illini and the Illini Cast as well. So he's my co-host over on Big Ten Show. It's at Big Ten Show on YouTube. And we have a little bit of a hiatus the last few months because he's been making a big move over to Austin, Texas, believe it or not. And so, you know, from Illinois out there. So, but we're firing stuff back up. We just kind of had a meeting last week, fire back stuff up this coming week. So we'll have stuff coming on that channel. The other one was just kind of like a startup. Me and my buddy did a little fantasy football live podcast that we were just kind of doing. We started it in like 2022, and that's kind of what springboarded this for us.
No, that's not your fault. My internet has been going in and out the last week.
Okay.
So yeah, I just froze and then we just started up again. So I'll have to edit that part. But so yeah, that's great then. I wanted to know, are you planning on going to any Husker games this year?
Yeah. So my family actually goes out there for at least one a year. We have a family trip out there every year where everybody from everywhere flies in. My cousin's, he's season ticket holder out there. And so, you know, he gets tickets for all of us, and we're going to the Colorado game this year. He has a lake house out there. So what we're going to do is it's going to be fun this year. We're taking a party bus from the lake house to the stadium, and then the party bus back to the lake house after. So we'll be at the Colorado game this year, at minimum, just the Colorado game. It's hard for me sometimes though, because I do have to be here for the post games, because I do live post games immediately following the games. So that's another factor too, as to why it's hard for me to get out and go to a ton of games. So at least until I can find someone to maybe cover down some post games for me. But yeah, I'm super excited about that one. That was going to be fun.
I am too. Oh, that's going to be fun. I'll see you there because I'm going as well.
Heck yeah. Hopefully I'll meet some people out there too, since I've started doing this. Hopefully I'll see some friendly faces. So look forward to meeting people too.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, I've seen that you've been on other YouTube shows. You've been on CornNation before with John. And are there any other YouTube shows that you watch specifically for the Huskers?
Yeah, so I mean, I've watched a few of them, but I think you know, probably the Voice of College Football was actually the one that I watched before I was a part of it. So that was kind of like the one I watched the most. You know, I've worked with Wilson Dittman on his channel, and he's got a lot of good stuff over there, very similar to mine, follow recruiting and all that other stuff. But then outside of that, like, I feel like the more I've done this, the less I've had time to watch. So I'll pop on, you know, Generation Red. You know, they have a real good kind of show over there where they got a lot of, you know, they have some former Husker players on and stuff like that every now and then, but it's a good casual, chill conversation. And then this guy, Coach BA from the BA Coaches Show, just started up his channel. So I like to watch his stuff too and show him support. And because he kind of gives you an insight into the X's and O's side of things. But those are the people right now that I kind of network with and work with. But like I said, it's since I've been doing this, I've had less and less time.
I am sorry. So I just went ahead and connected to my hotspot. I don't know why my internet has gone twice in this stream. So
it's all good.
Oy, well.
No.
So you said
either.
Wilson Dittman.
Yeah. So, you know, Wilson Dittman, I've worked with him, and like I said, he has a very similar style to me. I just don't have the time to watch a ton of people, so I like to hop on live streams. So I'll hop in on Wilson's occasionally. Of course, I hop in on y'all's CornNation, Generation Red. I've worked with Ken over there, so I've been, you know, tuning in, checking in with his live stream and just dropping in the chat and checking them out. And then Coach BA from the BA Coaches Show, he's got a newer show But he's a former coach, X's and O's guys, and is just kind of getting his footing into this realm. So I do like to watch a few guys when I have a chance, but since I've been doing this, it's like I've had a lot less time because I'm doing graphics and then both channels and all that other stuff. It seems like I don't have time to sit down sometimes and actually take in some of the content, So,
yeah, that's actually really a lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah. Where do you mainly get your info from about the Huskers?
So what I do is I dig for a lot of my style, and the way I like to do things is I'm very research heavy. And so I like to bring videos from an angle of where it would take a lot of work for people. Because one of the things that when I came into this, I was like, before I have connections or anything like that, or people with sources or anything like that, like, how am I going to stand out in this field? Especially now that I'm living in Arizona. But what I found out is just like, it's just putting in the work to find the information, connect the dots, and finding the deeper meaning behind stuff. So I have a very analytical mind, and I also have a lot of focus on the football side of things. So, I do a lot of film breakdowns, and I did one for Illinois player once, and then another Illinois player had asked Sonny if I could do his as well. And then the defensive coordinator shared my film study. So I love doing film. I love breaking that stuff down. I love the X's and O's. But as far as the information side of things goes, it's just like, I'm going to dig as much as I can, reach out to who I can to confirm information and that type of stuff. And so it's just a lot of a work on the back end. But I think that's what makes the content, watchable and sustainable for a lot of people, because they realize they're going to get something with me that they're probably not going to get elsewhere. So I just try to bring that unique spin and use my strengths to my advantage in that regard.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love your breakdowns. Speaking of breakdowns, I want to get into this year specifically. Do you think the Huskers will be able to run this year with a good passer? Do you think that'll help the run game?
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. And Satterfield's offense is historically, at Baylor, I think his offense averaged about probably like 250, 260. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, passing to about $120, $130 running per game, on average for a year. So, with the style of offense, he believes in the huddle, right? He loves to huddle. He thinks that's the backbone of football. You won't find Satterfield probably ever not huddling. He's going to be the last person to stop doing that. So he likes to get big. He likes to get physical. He likes to get in those big, heavy sets. But he likes to use the run to establish the deep pass. And, what we saw last year from a lot of defenses, of course, we didn't have the ability to stretch the field with the quarterback's arm. So, of course, they would be able to stack the box, 7-8 man boxes. And, we still had effective running backs. Emmett Johnson was able to perform against stacked boxes. But, when you're able to get, those safeties backed up, and you're able to kind of get everybody in the defense kind of back into their alignment, because they have to worry about, your deep ball guys like Isaiah Nayers and Jalen Lloyds. But then they also have to account for your possession guys like, Jamal Banks. That makes the defense a little bit more spread out, so they can't be in that box as much. So naturally, you're going to have a lot more running lanes and it's going to take those guys from the second and third level a little bit longer to get down, to be able to come downhill and be able to stop the run if they do make it in the second and third level. So without a doubt, I think those two are going to play off each other very well.
That actually leads me to the thought of our offensive line last year. A lot of people thought that they just weren't very good, but I mean, when the other team knows that you're going to be running the ball basically every play, how can that be the offensive line's fault?
Yeah.
Right.
And even to add to that, your quarterback makes life a lot easier or harder on your offensive line, depending on who they are. So, your when people think about offensive linemen, right, their backs to the quarterback. So it means a lot for them to know the tendencies of their quarterback, to know what their quarterback's capable of. Well, last year we had a rotation of guys at quarterback and, different styles, but then you also had guys that like Haarberg, who is a one read guy, and then he's scrambling. And so that puts that does put the offensive line in some predicaments sometimes, because you got to be aware at all times that, like, hey, he's might be escaping the pocket. We got to maybe move the pocket, or we got to seal off this edge or whatever. And when they're moving around a lot back there, can make it a little harder. Whereas with Dylan, he seems a little bit more, he's going to be more intentional with his moving around the pocket. He's going to step up in the pocket. He's going to move out and get out to his spot. CJ Stroud talks about it as being like a spot up jump shooter in the NBA and getting to your spots. And Raiola is going to probably be one of those quarterbacks that's going to have his spots to get to on his plays, that he knows, okay, if this pocket's collapsing here, I need to roll out and I need to get to, this side so I can get to my second tertiary reads. Right. And so, with the offensive line having consistent quarterback play, somebody who can hold the snap, somebody they know isn't just going to scramble willy-nilly. They kind of know his tendencies because they're a little bit more consistent. That's going to take a lot of pressure off of the offensive line as well to perform. And especially with the Prohaska injury coming out yesterday, we're going to need to take a lot of pressure off this line. But the line did improve year over year. In the numbers, the line improved. I know people still kind of, attack the offensive line, but Raiola did a great job in developing that line year over year. So I expect it to be pretty good this year, especially with Raiola back there.
Yeah, same. So what do you think that they ought to do with Heinrich Haarberg? I mean, he's the only quarterback that we have on our roster that's actually played in a game and won for us. So, but he's a great athlete. If he's not a starter, then what do you do with him? Does he really sit and be number 2?
So what I think is the best course of action, because we do have Jalen Gramstead. And I know people are excited about Jalen Gramstead coming in late in the offseason, right? From the NAIA. And of course, he was, NAIA National Player of the Year. That is a collegiate, level. He's won, he has shown his arm. He showed his arm at the practice the other day. But there's a lot he has to learn still, because he did come in late in this process. And Matt Rule always talks about his offseason process, and it is a structured process for a reason, and he values guys that go through that and all that stuff. I just don't think Gramstead's been here long enough. He has the much better arm. I just don't think he's been here long enough, and he has still too much to learn to be the 2. So I think Haarberg's still going to be the 2, but I do think that they're going to mix Haarberg into a bunch of different packages and kind of get him out there and take advantage of his athleticism and his speed, because you have to. Like, he is just a football player through and through. He's one of the fastest guys on the team, but not only that, he's one of the best leaders on the team. And you want your leaders out there on the field. And we saw last year, Haarberg's willing to put his body on the line, to go out there and make a play. And, putting him in a position where it's more advantageous for him to do that, and having him out there in the packages to be able to kind of maintain him and not wear him down for taking 20, hits a game as a quarterback. I think we can get a lot of value out of him, but at the same time, they're going to want to try to maintain his health at least until they feel like, maybe if they feel a little bit more comfortable with Gramstead, they'll roll him out there more. But I do think it's going to be slowly a gradual thing where Heinrich Haarberg is going to slowly roll out more and more packages. But it'll be interesting to see how Gramstead comes along, because he's got a great arm. He wants to be a coach, but that's what I see him being in that room. Gramstead wants to be a coach in his future, so I do see him being a type of guy who's going to be a guy who's won. So he has winning, mentality. He knows how to give that, advice to those guys on what it takes to win. He has the confidence, but he's going to be a leader and a coach in that room. And I think eventually Matt Rule will turn him into a GA grad assistant, and because that's typically what he likes to do. And when they were talking about him, they said that he reminds them of some of the other guys that they've had in the past that have turned into GA. So I think Haarberg will be the 2, but he's going to be out there in packages for sure.
Yeah. Cool. So, talking about the offense, some more skill players. We have 17 wide receivers on our roster.
Yeah.
17.
Wild.
I know, it's wild. And there's so many that are just at the top of that list that, especially with the transfers that we got in and the development that we've had. When Matt Rule came on board, he was able to get Malachi Coleman to commit to Nebraska. It was one of his biggest gets in recruitment.
Yeah.
Where do you see Malachi competing with the Isaiah Nayers and the Jamal Banks and the Jalen Lloyds.
Yeah, I see.
With Malachi.
Malachi, I think Malachi can learn a lot from both of those guys. I do think that he'll probably be the backup X behind Banks. So what Jamal Banks can teach him, because Jamal Banks is one of those, Jamal Banks, the transfer in from Wake Forest. He's one of those guys who he reminds me very much of a DeAndre Hopkins, right? Because he has the length, the physical attributes, but he really knows how to use them. And there's a difference between having those and being able to use those physical attributes to your advantage. So he knows how to get up and get a 50-50 ball over a guy. He knows how to fight for the red line on the sideline, battle for that space. And that's his space. He has every right to that space as much as the defensive back does. So, there's little things in his game that make him a receiver who is able to put himself in a position to catch the passes. And even though at Wake Forest he had a bad quarterback, he still had no drops. So he's a sure-handed guy who's going to be able to come in there and help a guy like Malachi be able to use his, longer arms and his tall body and use that frame to be able to really kind of to his advantage to go up and high point balls. And then you got Isaiah Nair, who's also, tall. He's, almost just as big Jamal Banks, but he's a little bit more of a speed guy. So you can get a little different perspective there from a playmaking guy, but he'll get his reps but he's going to be behind those guys, of course, because, those guys are win now. And it doesn't, Malachi, if he does, because he had opportunities last year and we didn't get to see a ton. So I just think it's that lack of experience that's going to keep him off the field as a starter for now, but he's definitely going to be rotated in there pretty consistently as long as his game continues to progress and he starts to make something of those reps for sure. But the talent, we know the talent's there. Absolutely. And I expect a good season for him.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good to hear. I have a question about our defense. Do you think that there should be any concerns in the linebacker room with Nick Heinrich leaving and Reimer leaving?
No.
No?
I love our linebacker room. Our linebacker and one of the things that we can take away that they talked about when talking, I believe it was Deshaun Singleton talking yesterday. He mentioned that those guys kind of left a standard, for them. And you got your guys like Giff. Like Giff is that version of, your Reimers, and Garrett Nelsons and stuff like that. Those guys that are going to fly to the ball, play 100% on every single rep. And losing those guys hurts, of course, but I think what we're seeing now in terms of what Matt Rhule is implementing is he's trying to build a roster of guys just like that. And he wants everybody to be that guy flying to the football. And so I think with some of these guys returning and stuff like that, I think we have a good mentorship, especially of these young guys, to kind of have them, playing at, the fire with the fire and tenacity, and maybe not at the level those guys were, but a lot of the guys that we have now have the upside talent wise to, be just as good, if not better at certain points, if they continue to work and become that level of a hardworking player. I'm gonna preface it with that, but the depth is there. Stephon Thompson coming over in from Syracuse, who, he was a linebacker in the 3-3-5 when Tony White was there. So he's a Tony White recruit. We got him in this offseason. Vincent Shavers, the true freshman phenom, coming on, strong this offseason. We got Willis McGay. He's, the Javen Wrights, like the linebacker core in my eyes is one of the stronger units. I love our linebacker room, and the defensive line, of course, is stacked, whether it be line or ends. That's really stacked. The biggest concern, I think, is depth at the cornerback position. But I really like the linebackers as we have them, and I'm interested to see kind of how that rotation is going to go. Especially with them, rotating out the Jack and Rover position and kind of see who kind of leads the way there. And who gets those final spots in the outside.
Yeah. Speaking of Jacks, MJ Sherman.
Yeah.
He's ready to have his year, don't you think?
100%. He comes across as a guy who's he's a worker, like, and
Yeah.
he's a bought in. You can tell, and he's just he's a very cerebral player, and I just think he loves to play the game of football. And yeah, I'm excited to see what MJ Sherman will do this year, and especially that entire room, because you know, the assistant coach Jack that they got teaching him, ironically his name's Jack. You know, they said they've
easy to remember.
Yeah, they said they've loved having him out there, because now the assistants and quality coaches can coach the players. So he said he's been in his ear yesterday. Like, he said he'd already been in his ear, but they love having him out there. So I'm excited to see what he's done with this room too, now that it's a little bit more hands-on too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so you mentioned the cornerbacks are a little bit of a concern because of we don't know what's going on with Bly Hill. We have Sire Wright coming in from USC. That's kind of it's kind of questionable still.
Yeah.
Right.
Bly Hill was probably like one of my favorite transfers, and I think he flew a lot he came on late. Like, a lot more people have, caught on to him late because they've talked about him well. But when he came on, he was one of probably the most underrated, in my opinion, in terms of the transfer guys, because of his frame, right? 6'3", long, rangy guy. Like, he's a prototypical perfect corner, underclassman. So he's got a lot of room to develop, and great ball skills. I did a film review on him. Tremendous ball skills. He has, he knows how to time it, and that's the most important thing about a cornerback having good ball skills, is being able to play the ball as well, if not better, than the receiver. And so Bly, the prognosis on his injury at least seems a little bit promising. The fact that it wasn't major, and it seems like he could be back, sometime soon, hopefully before week 2. But it was also promising that we got to see a little bit of Sierra Wright at the open practice, and we're able to see him kind of making some plays out there. Because the thing with Sierra, it's never been his abilities. He was over the reason he went to USC originally was because he's an actor as well. And in his words, the reason he went to USC is because he wanted to be closer to Hollywood. And and so he wanted to pursue that. And that was, there was a little bit of a mixed bag of emotions and feelings about that, and in terms of his concentration, his focus to the game of football. But when he came over, I was like, you have to think that if he commits to Nebraska and he's leaving that area, he probably wants to put his focus on the football now going forward. And if he does that, the sky's the limit with him. It was just a matter of, like, he had been off for a little while, just seeing how he would come in and be able to learn the ropes of Matt Rule's system and culture, just because it's a different culture out there. And as we've seen people say, I think Sierra said it, that it's a different standard here. And so, but it seems like on the field, at least, that he's flying around making plays. He, jumped a route in front of Jamal Banks at that open practice. So it's looking good. It's the depth. The talent is there at the top end. It's just the depth. Because Tommy Hill, I did a video about Tommy Hill a little while back, as I, had him as a potential projected first rounder, if, seeing as last year defensive backs went late, and Tommy Hill finished coverage grade wise with Kamari Lassard and Kool-Aid McKinstry in the same realm of coverage grade, and those guys went early second round last year. So Tommy Hill, to me, he put some size on as well, put some bulk on. He's going to be fantastic. He has to stay healthy, but outside of that, it's just a lot of unknowns, because there's not a lot of experience outside of those guys at the cornerback room, especially. So, and then the rotation that they kind of want to do a little bit more between the corners and the safeties was kind of put on a little bit of a hiatus, because Bly Hill being out kind of limited what they move around at corner and safety. So,
yeah. Well, we do have that new DB coach, John Butler, who sounds totally amazing. We got to hear him speak in the press conference the other day. This guy had like one of the top defenses in the NFL for years. How did we luck out to get a guy like him? I mean, you think back to where we were just a few years ago with our defense, and
it's wild.
I mean,
but
I don't know about that, but it's crazy.
What I was, the thing that I'm most impressed about John Butler, and I'm familiar with John Butler as a Houston Texans fan, because he coached our defensive backs back when we had Jonathan Joseph and AJ Bouye. And one of the things that he did do when he was there is he was one of the key cogs in developing AJ Bouye into being a really good cornerback, especially there for a couple of years. And he peaked in that 2017, I think it was his last year in Houston. And that was kind of the year AJ Bouye kind of had its peak, if I'm not remember the years correctly. But you'll see AJ Bouye, he went up in 2017, and then 2018 he got traded to Jacksonville and had a very similar stat line, and then kind of regressed a little bit after that. But John Butler had those guys coached up very well and developed AJ Bouye into a really good player. So I was familiar with him before, but to your point, it was a little bit of luck and timing as well, because like John Butler said yesterday, usually you're not expecting a coach to get a call this point or that point in the offseason to get hired. And so he had almost kind of compartmentalized the fact that he's probably not going to be coaching that year, and he was enjoying his time off. And then, it just happenstance. I remember we heard Matt Rule or somebody say a while back that like there was somebody in the area, as similar areas, John Butler, and they were able to go like meet with him or something like that. So it was a lot of coincidence, a lot of good timing things. And John Butler he saw the opportunity, and as he said, it was too good of an opportunity for him to pass up to come to a place like Nebraska. His aspirations in Buffalo, he wants to be a defensive coordinator, and I think he saw that the path there was a lot longer, since they had just hired a new defensive coordinator. It was going to take him a lot longer, so he wanted to step back in a way. And I like the way he said it yesterday. He's like, listen, like I don't want to talk about why I left Buffalo, because I don't want it to seem like I'm a placeholder to get a promotion here, because he knows that he's going to have to come in here and work and learn the 3-3-5, because he ran a 4-2-5 over in Buffalo, and they share a very similar style player, but at the same time they're different defenses. And so it's not something where he was going to come in and have a cakewalk here to the defensive coordinator position. He knows the work that's ahead of him, and he's going to try to prove himself to get that spot. He doesn't want to hand it to him, and that's one of the things that I think people should know about him. He's a grinder. He's a worker, and he has a high standard, and he sets that standard, and he expects that standard. He's a hard coach, but he loves his players. And the reason he coaches so hard is because he knows what it takes to get them to the next level. And he talks about that a lot, just talks about what it takes and what type of player, he talks about from head to toe. You got to be a pro from the top to bottom. That includes your mindset, your character, everything that you do. And so he fits exactly the mold of what this staff is looking for in terms of their messaging as well, because that shares a similar sentiment that Matt Rule, talks about all the time.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like he was custom made for us.
Yeah. I hope so, because that means he'll be around a little while. So
yeah, me too. So we talked about offense a little bit. We talked about defense. The question is, especially right now, how do you feel about special teams?
Not good. And I feel like, we're all kind of in that boat. Buschini had a rough day, the open practice, which was kind of the negative storyline of the day, because Buschini has not been good in a while. And, one of the things that is most important, of course, is being able to flip the field. And we have to have that ability to flip the field, especially in the Big Ten, where a lot of the games are about getting a lead, sitting on that lead, and limiting the amount of possessions that the other team gets. The less amount of possessions, the less likely they are to come back. And so you want to make the most out of being able to flip the field when you get those possessions and give yourself an advantageous field position, because that matters even more in low possession games. So I don't know what is up with Buschini. I don't know if it's like something he's showing in practice well, but not in the actual like open practice and games. So the jury's out on Buschini, and we'll see if he gets boom skinny.
Yeah,
played there by I think Camden Cook would be the guy, but we'll see. I think it's just he's got to get consistent. He just has to get more consistent. Like he can kick the ball a long way, but he's got to be a lot more consistent. Otherwise, it's going to be more beneficial to go with a guy with less leg who can just get you more yards average. So, but when it comes to a field goal game, The field goal, with Alvano, I've been on an island a lot of this offseason, even last season, because I think what a lot of people aren't thinking about when it comes to Alvano, we see him missing field goals and struggling with all the hype that was coming in. And we saw him go 5 for 5, in the state championship game and kick that 50+ yarder to win. So we know he can kick under pressure. But I think, looking at the totality of the circumstances, right? He's coming in here as a freshman. He's being asked to kick at the University of Nebraska, a school that has a storied tradition of good kickers. And not only that, the offense is anemic and can't score points. So how much more pressure was put on to the back of Alvano to score points for this team because the offense couldn't? Like, it was him or nobody. And to me, I feel like that's an extra layer of pressure that people aren't really accounting for, is the fact that, he had the points were on him. And this is a season where everybody's, kind of looking at first year Matt Rule and all this other stuff. The eyes are on Nebraska a lot. It's no secret. And I think a lot of that was just frustration overall with everything going on in the team. That Alvano was also not doing his things. But to me, kicking is very, very mental, right? And if football's mental, right? If you're thinking, you're not reacting, right? You don't want to be thinking out there. Like, if you're overthinking your mechanics and you're not just, doing it by muscle memory, you're going to be a half step late or you're going to be tight, right? And so, like, when he's there overthinking his kicking mechanics, his hips are going to be a little tighter, his leg, his follow through is not going to be as loose. So those little things can make or break a kick. It's all about the details, getting it down to the most fine-tuned details. And if you're tight and you're thinking, then you're going to sell yourself short, because it just has to flow. They got to get out there, and that's why they call it like ice water in your veins. Don't worry about everything around you, right? You just got to go out there and kick it like you do in practice. And that's why these guys are able to drill 60, 70 yarders in practice, but then they get out there and they get a little tight, and then they're not able to kick it as far, but some of the guys can still keep it accurate, and so it's just learning how to kind of navigate that. I think another year kind of going through the offseason protocol of being put in tough situations and building that mental resilience. And like Matt Rule said the other day, he wants guys to play through their mistakes. So I'm hoping, even Alvano's coming off of an injury. He had groin surgery, but his 2 weeks is up. He's recovered. We'll see if he's better by the season. I'm not sure how conservative they're going to play that, but I do hope when Alvano's healthy, he does get another shot to go out there, because I do think he is the most talent of all of our kickers for sure.
Okay. Wow, I never looked at it like that. That is such good information.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'd be remiss not to mention and not to ask you about our other star freshman, Dylan Raiola. I mean, what do you think is a realistic expectation for him this year, as far as, looking at what we did last year in comparison?
And this is one of the things that I don't think enough people on the outside look at, because people they point at Dylan Raiola as a true freshman quarterback. Nebraska's, they got a true freshman quarterback. How are they going to be good? But the thing is, that's one thing if you're coming from a quarterback of consistency to a true freshman quarterback. But let's say Dylan Raiola was playing last year. Let's think about, even with all of the crap that went down, all of the turnovers, let's say all those turnovers are still there, right? But, we had him at quarterback for, a few of those possessions, right? And he was an effective game manager. Like, let's say 3 possessions a game in some of those 1-score losses. He was just an effective game manager. That's all he would have needed to be to turn some of those into wins. And so people are thinking like Dylan Raiola is the only thing that this team got and the only way this team got better. But he doesn't have to go out there and sling it around, 500 yards a game. This is a good team. This team has made good improvements. So Dylan Raiola I don't think there's as much pressure on him as people think. I think there's a lot of pressure on him for sure. But in terms of putting the team on his back, I think there's a lot more team around him than people give him credit for. And I think that's going to show. I don't think they're going to ask him to do too much. They're going to let him loose occasionally. Of course, they're going to take advantage of his arm. But the best thing to do is to coach around a true freshman quarterback, is to put him in the best situation possible. And so what they're going to do is they're probably going to try to keep it, early on, a very simplified version of kind of the offense and just give him like 1 to 2 decisions a play, let him make a couple decisions. We'll start by that. And then kind of like, add a little bit more to his plate, and it's be more of the coaching, less of him. And then it'll slowly transition to more of him, less of the coaching. And, but I think for that time frame, it's just, they're going to let him go out there and play his game, but he's going to make sure that and when I say game manager, I don't mean like he's not, but people say game manager, they sort of think that as a negative on a quarterback if they're a game managing quarterback. But I mean it more so the sense of making the smart play, instead of taking an extra hit to get 3 yards, right? Know when to throw that ball away and just be like, I don't want to take that hit because those add up. So I'm going to take, the loss of yards or not get that gain of yards to be able to fight another down and not take that extra hit. And I think it's those little things, or, just knowing not when to try to squeeze a ball into a tight window, or, just being able to get the snap. Like those are just things that your quarterback needs to do in managing the game properly. And so, I expect him to come out here, and I think we could see in the realm of 2,200, passing yards, 25, 28 touchdowns, and probably say 7 to 9 interceptions, if it's even that. But just trying to be on a conservative point, I think that's probably good enough to get Nebraska to 7-8 wins.
Yeah, that's, and it's not Matt Rule's first time playing a freshman quarterback. He did it at Temple and he did it at Baylor. And they had, at Temple, they had 60.8% completion, and Charlie Burr at Baylor had 77.4%.
He ended up being a dang good
somewhere around. Right. You're exactly right. I never heard somebody put it that way before. It really matters kind of the team around the quarterback. And yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Getting on to what we're looking forward to within the next month. We have UTEP. Do you think that they're a concern at all? Should we be concerned, or do you think that's a gimme?
Normally, I would be remiss to call something a gimme. I would not do that. Just being a Nebraska fan, we've been burned in the past. However, UTEP is under a first-year head coach, and they are undergoing a big roster turnover. So they're not just a normal, smaller school coming in here as a week 1 game. That is a school in a transition. And so they weren't good last year, and they're probably going to take a step back this year because they're in a rebuild. And so I think that game right there is a very good one for Nebraska to get out there and just kind of let some of this stuff roll, try to roll out some of these other guys and get them, apologies for my camera, I'll pop that back on. Let some other guys get out there and do their, show themselves and stuff like that, and get Dylan Raiola some reps, but get him out of there before he gets hit too much. And I think that's going to be a valuable game for this team, especially to rest up going into Colorado. I think it's going to be, who of them to try to get in there, handle business, and get guys off the field so they don't get injured. But also at the same time, we have a lot of youth on this team that does need reps. So that'll be a valuable opportunity for them to get some reps as well. But I don't expect UTEP to be too much of a hassle just based on that fact alone, that they're probably going to regress from last year. Good to know.
Do you think that we'll get another 5-star recruit? We have this Michael Terry III, and we have David Sanders Jr., who, Dylan Raiola played a leading role in that recruiting process. Yep. I don't know how you feel about players recruiting potential players, but
I love it. Yeah. Because the interesting thing to note about, and I'll just start with Michael Terry because it's going to be the shorter one. Michael Terry right now, it still seems, from what I've heard, Michael Terry's family, parents have been reaching out to other, commitments and recruits, parents, asking them questions about Texas and stuff like that. Now, I don't know if that's an indication that he's looking to go there. However, he did mention Texas is home state. He does want to stay in Texas if possible. NIL is not his number one thing. he does like where Nebraska's going to use him in terms of fit, but it seems like Oregon and Texas are the two leaders for him. I would still put Nebraska third there, but the fact that Nebraska's hanging in there and beat out schools like Texas A&M, which is another home state school and stuff like that. Like that's very telling because Michael Terry he played 5 positions at his high school, 5 different positions, quarterback. He moved all over and offense, defense. So he's a do it all type of guy. That would be a program changing type of player. But the fact that Nebraska has made it into this top and made such a noise in his recruiting process against some of these, schools that people would say, are ahead of Nebraska. That's big for us to start out because that's something that hasn't been happening. And now moving over to Sanders, the interesting thing about this David Sanders recruitment is Raiola and Sanders had a relationship at Georgia when they were both being recruited over there when Dylan was committed over there because David Sanders was offered by Georgia. Mm-hmm. The other schools that were in this race with Nebraska, Ohio State, Tennessee, and Georgia, they had been recruiting him for 3-4 years. Nebraska didn't get on recruiting him until Dylan Raiola came to Nebraska. And that was when Nebraska offered because, them two had been in touch and stuff like that. And so he had taken one trip to Nebraska. I believe it was Mother's Day weekend. And, like I said, those schools have been recruiting him for the longest time. And even Clemson, I think Clemson's hometown team, home state team, something like that. But they've been recruiting for years. And Nebraska was able to come in, this year, get him to campus once. And then not only that, get him to campus again here when he announced he was going to visit Nebraska and Tennessee, which, appeared to be his final 2. I had heard Ohio State's still in communication with him around the time of those visits, but seemingly it looked like those 2 might be the final 2. Maybe these trips were finalizing details or trying to get the final decision made. But I think it's just huge the fact that Nebraska came in so late in the process and shows their ability to build relationships with these guys to that extent to where they literally have a 50-50 shot at landing a guy. Like Dawson Merritt was very similar. Came in late on the recruiting process, Dawson Merritt, and battled with Bama for him. And so David Sanders right now, I would give Nebraska maybe a 50-50 shot. I was 60-40, but the one thing that we can't account for, because I know for a fact that visit went as well as it could have for David Sanders. It went as well as it could have, but Tennessee had the last visit. And that always matters in recruiting because recency bias, right? That you want to be the last school in that because then once they leave your school, you can be like, okay, well, here's what he thought about us. We ain't got to worry about it. That's the last thing on his mind. Whereas when he goes to Tennessee, we don't know what they pulled out there. So I've been between 60-40, 50-50. Maybe the glass half full of me sides 50-50, but I do think that Nebraska has a legitimate shot. And I do think that he is genuinely, having difficulty deciding between the two schools. But if Nebraska loses on this, it's potentially just because they came in so late in the process.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. You mentioned multi-position players. Yep. Carter Nelson. This is another freshman that, holy cow, if we don't see this kid on the field, I will be surprised. What an athlete.
Yes. Probably
what
one
do you
of the
think
best
about
athletes. Yeah. Probably one of the best athletes on the team. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't.
He will be used. The thing about him, part about him, he's a late enrollee, which you don't like, but they're going to get him on the field, and they're going to get him on the field as a wide receiver, though. So tight end is a difficult position to learn and come in and play effectively as a true freshman, because tight end, you not only have to know how to, run routes and do that stuff, but you have to know blocking concepts. And he needs a little bit more bulk on him. He needs a little bit more strength on him until he's able to effectively play the tight end position. So they're going to run him at, they're going to move him around. They're going to run him at wide receiver, in packages to make sure that they can take advantage of the athleticism and get him on the field. Matt Royd even mentioned earlier this offseason, putting him in the backfield occasionally, just like on some package runs and stuff like that. So we will see Carter Nelson used on the field. At how much remains to be seen. I don't know if they want to use his red shirt but it probably depends on, I guess, just the efficacy of what they see when he's out there. And if he goes out there and he gives us a better chance to win, then we're probably going to see him out on the field more. And so, it'll be interesting to see as they roll him out there in those reps, how he does. But I think he'll be perfectly fine in there as a slot wide receiver, just getting out on some routes and being able to let him, use his ball skills and his athleticism to be able to, make some kind of impact on this offense in year one.
That is so awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, this year certainly has, hope is running through our veins like no other year in recent memory.
Yep.
I have a little statistic that I
got hope tattooed on my hand, so it's perfect.
Oh, I need one of those. Hope. I have a little statistic I like to run by you that I found. Nebraska currently on our roster, we have 6 out of the top 22 players of the century on our roster that will be hopefully taking the field this year. 6 out of the top 22 ever.
That's on 6 out of 22
of the century
of the century for Nebraska.
Yeah.
That's wild. Actually, I didn't even know that. 6 of 22. Yeah. I think that just further goes to show just the optimism and the reason for optimism around this team. Returning 78% of total production from last season, 76% on offense, 78% on defense. That matters, and having, you got to have top end talent, as we say. Matt Rule's a developer, but you got to have those guys who are going to come in, and having a lot of those guys that came back from last year is invaluable. Like you can't stress how important it was to have those guys come back, and they came back because they see the positive in this. They think this is turning around and they want to be part of it. So yeah, that's actually an interesting stat, but it's good to know because that is very telling.
It is. And, I just keep thinking about where we were this time last year.
Yeah.
With losing one of our coaches and then one of our players getting arrested. And then a year before that, we had all the problems with the law as well. So we weren't headed in a very good direction for a while there. And now it seems everything is just kind of, it's all about football. Like it should be.
Finally. Yeah. And I think that's part of more and more as we see, Matt Rule tries to bring in a certain type of player here. He tries to bring in a certain character of player here. And and he wants them to be great young men, not just great football players. And so I think more and more as time goes on, we're going to start to see it just be about football, because I think the type of culture that he's going to bring here, it's going to weed those guys out, and those guys won't survive and last on this roster. And so I think that's a trend in the right direction. It's something we can continue to see, just because that's just the type of culture that he brings to this team. I think before it was a very relaxed, loose culture. I know the Gilbert stuff happened under Rule, but it was, when he kind of just got here, and Gilbert wasn't a guy that was kind of brought through the system. It was just kind of bad timing. He got brought here and it happened. So I think, the Evan Cooper stuff is obviously unfortunate, but I think we can expect, you look at what's going on in Georgia and stuff like that, they can't stay out of trouble. So it's exciting. I'm ready. I'm fired up for the season, and I'm glad we're actually finally talking football now, especially because I love recruiting. I love film, but talking about Husker football in the season coming up, man, it's exciting.
It is exciting. Well, and on that note, I think that we will just end the stream. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and letting me drill you about these Husker questions that I've been wanting to ask. And I hope that you and I can hopefully get together one of these days and watch a Husker game.
Absolutely. There's a ton, as you know, it's a huge Husker following here in Nebraska. The Huskers in Arizona, alumni group that travels from sports bar to sports bar. That's fun. I've been on a few of those. So yeah, absolutely. Would love to.
All right, Justin. Well, thank you so much. And where can people find you again?
Yeah. And thank you for having me on as well. I really appreciate it. But yeah, y'all can find me over at Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football. And also over on the Big Ten Show. It's at Big Ten Show on YouTube. And you can also find me on X at _H-Town Husker. I'm kind of new over there. I got on August of last year. So I got on because I started doing this. I was like, well, I have to be on Twitter now to that's where all the information goes first and recruiting news goes first. So y'all can follow me over there as well, or breaking news and stuff. So.
That's how I found you. All
Yep.
right. Well, I guess we'll end it on Go Big Red, right?
Absolutely. Go Big Red.
All right. Thank you.